In this video, we're going to be diving into one specific altcoin, and today it's going to be SUI. As you know, I'm interested into newer coins because I believe that new technology is going to do better in terms of return. That's why we're going to be focusing on which altcoins are actually going to be interesting. And today we talk about SUI. Let's get started. Before we get started, I just wanted to make clear that I'm not sponsored by SUI and I'm not having it in my own portfolio, but I do believe that it's an interesting one to have there. So that's why we want to be as objective as possible and review this altcoin and tell you more about what this project is doing. Now, SUI is having a pretty original origin, I would say, in which it has been coming from a team that started in 2020 and 2021 from what we currently call Meta. Facebook and Meta had the design to create their own cryptocurrency, which was called Libra, and it was doing pretty okay, but they were slammed down by the Fed and they couldn't continue that project. So the 5 team members of SUI, or the 5 board members of SUI, started their own project, which we know as SUI. The company behind SUI is called Mistine Labs, and the vision of Libra is also the vision of SUI. So what they wanted to do is make DeFi possible for everyone, make it broader, through which this clearly couldn't happen with Libra, but it could be happening with SUI at this point as they started the new project. And SUI has been going quite well, as currently they are already in the top 50 and they have been raising a lot of funds to initially get started. And as you can see, they've done a Series A at the end of 2021 and they have done a Series B during 2022 during the bear market. During 2021, they raised 38 million from A16Z, Slow Ventures and more. And now the interesting part comes in. They raised $300 million for the project in September of 2022 from Circle Ventures, Jump Capital, Binance Labs, Coinbase Ventures and FTX Ventures, which was one of the biggest investors and was actually the lead of the investment round during that period, where FTX invested 94 million into SUI. Now we all know what happened after that period as FTX went down. So what did SUI do? Because having all those tokens in a bankrupt company is a certain risk for all the other investors. So what they basically did is they bought back the stake of FTX for approximately $94 million. So that issue is covered. But what we can tell is that SUI has enough funds to continue building. The question is, what is SUI actually doing? The question is, why do you need all those blockchains and what is SUI doing? That's probably a very normal question to ask. SUI is a layer 1, and SUI, as I can quote on their website, SUI sets itself apart from other layer 1 chains with its focus on instant transaction finality, reduced latency in smart contract deployment and overall transaction speed. One of the ways it aims to achieve these goals is through Move. It's built in Move, a native programming language based on the Rust crypto programming language. Move hopes to make the development of smart contracts easier for developers, thereby expanding access and functionality within the DeFi industry. So SUI itself is a layer 1 that is technically focusing on scalability. It wants to be super fast and it wants to be able to overall have a lot of transactions being done for low cost. That's basically what it wants. So in which category should it fall? Technically you would say SUI, Solana, all those very fast scalable blockchains that have their own actual use case. So going back to what a layer 1 is, a layer 1 is basically a settlement layer where all the blockchain transactions are settled on. And we know that Ethereum is in effect a layer 0 and a layer 1. And Ethereum in itself is not scalable, super secure, but it's also not fast. And that might work for certain use cases, but for others it doesn't. So that's why we are going to have a modular blockchain space where we have multiple layer ones. And in this case, Solana is a blockchain that is mostly being used for deep-in, memes, utility tokens with a high throughput. And for SUI, this can also be the case for the exact same uses, but it's also the case for DeFi, because if I want to buy something for a coffee, or if I want to pay something in a borrowing and lending protocol, and we want thousands of users to be using a DeFi protocol, it needs to be scalable. And that's why you need a blockchain that is able to have a lot of transactions in a second or in a minute. And that's why you can see that with Ethereum, for instance, that it's super secure. Then on top of that, we've got layer 2s that have the same benefits as SUI or SAI has in terms of high throughput and all those things that these layer 1s have. So in some ways, SUI is a competitor of Solana, barely decentralized, as only 120 validators are currently working on SUI. So you could say that it's relatively centralized, but the fact is that if you want to become a validator, and validators are needed to secure the blockchain, making sure that we can use the blockchain and that it doesn't get hacked. And the more validators, the more decentralized, the more that is locked within the ecosystem, the better it is for the security of SUI itself. That is a positive sign, because more than 80% of SUI is currently locked in staking, which means it's a very secure blockchain and it's super hard to be hacked. The other side is that you need at least 30 million SUI to become a validator if you want to be one of those. And that is equivalent to 30 million USD. So becoming a validator is relatively hard, which makes it not decentralized or more centralized, while you could be a liquid staker and still have the benefits of staking SUI. So in some way it's not decentralized, in some ways it is, but we do know that it has a high level of transactions and it's currently the number 2 behind Solana. So it's definitely the Solana killer or fighter that is currently around in the space. You know, I'm a huge fan of Cardano. It's doing so many great things. That's why I've almost gotten Cardano tattoo at this point. No, I'm kidding. But overall, you can have the best crypto projects out there. But the actual fact is that they need to be doing something. And that is what we're looking at in the coming few years. And that's why I think the markets are changing. So in this part, we discuss what the news items are for SUI. And several important factors are there, of which the first one is that SUI is just around for slightly more than a year, but it's already in the top 10 of DeFi. And what does that say? In DeFi, it's important to have as much money as you can have locked within the ecosystem, because that money is being used to have more transactions, more users, and also more revenue, through which the entire ecosystem starts to be built up. In that case, SUI has more than 600 million locked into the protocol, into the top 10 of DeFi, and is larger than Optimism. It's larger than Tonchain, for instance. So it has been doing something, in which the important part here is not exactly that it's in the top 10, but what we can see on the chart is that we can see that it's not been losing anything in the past 6 months. So if you go to the Ton blockchain or any other blockchain at this point, then since March, there was a huge outflow of interest. With the fact with SUI is actually that we're still at the exact same value of TVL as with March, while the price is substantially lower, which means that there's a lot of upside to be gained, but it's also aiming to break through the all-time high of TVL. So it's a very strict and strong blockchain out there, which is also coming through as Grayscale's trust is coming up, and Grayscale has said that they are going to start their own trust alongside BitTensor, through which the price started to rally, and the amount of interest was more than 100 million into SUI. So more than 100 million wants to lock their funds into a trust in SUI, and the trust is technically an institutional product where you have some sort of ETF that is tracking the price of SUI. So institutional parties in the US are actually able to buy the token through such a product because they are not allowed to buy specific cryptocurrencies themselves. So showing that SUI has more than 100 million in interest is super positive for the coin itself. As I said earlier in this video, more than 80% of SUI is staked, but it's also very positive. It's actually astronomical. For ETH, only 30% is staked, and the higher amount is staked, the more positive that is for the security of the actual blockchain. Now, the most tricky news item is the fact that they are going to release a hardware device. It's a gaming device. It's called SUI Play 0x1. I used to be a gamer, and I'm currently not a gamer as I've got a lot of adult things to do, which is running a company, having a girlfriend, playing golf, and all those boring stuff actually. But I used to be a gamer, and I think that this is a super big market to be in. I'm just not sure what we can expect from hardware devices. We technically have seen the Akash GPU computers. We have seen Solana with the mobile phone, which has been having a lot of traffic. And now SUI is coming with a hardware device where it's accepting pre-orders and is likely going to go live later this year. So a lot of attraction is going to come from that, especially if you can game and earn tokens in the meantime. I think that's going to boom significantly. Now that is great, but now the question is, which is a central topic, is what are the tokenomics, what are the unlocks, and what are the potential price predictions for SUI? The primary question we have is, do we have low float, high FTV, or when are the unlocks of the VCs, because the VCs always make money and we want to make money ourselves as well. With SUI, we are technically already after the big event taking place. So what do we see when we look at the actual tokenomics? We can see that there is a gradual unlock, which is just normal. But we also see that we've had a very massive unlock taking place in May 2024 of approximately 10% of the amount of tokens that were unlocked. And if you compare the unlock to the price action, then in March and April, also due to the markets in general, we've seen that the markets have been having a peak, and in SUI's case as well. And since then, the price started to drop substantially. So SUI went from $2.50 to $1 and even lower, primarily due to the fact that so many tokens were unlocked and released. So they created a pretty heavy sell-off on the markets. And that is a reference to the article that came out from Binance, which is low float, high FTV. And low float means that only a small percentage of the total supply is released and being traded, and the remainder is still locked up, and that's what creates a high FTV. So for SUI, for instance, the market capitalization is at 2.5 billion at this point, but the total FTV is around 10 billion. So it's a question of how you should be valuing the actual project. And I think the total FTV is going to spread out for multiple years with projects anyway. Some projects even have 10 to 15 years as vesting, through which you should be using the circulating supply to actually value a product. So the expectations for SUI are in that case super positive. I think that most of the investors that have been getting their unlocks in May have been selling, because if you do a raise of 300 million in 2022, it usually equals at a valuation of 2.5 to 4 billion. And if you go back to the prices that we had in March to April, the FTV of that period was between 20 to 25 billion. So the investors in that round already had a 5 to 6x, so likely they have been selling a significant portion of their tokens. Now the cliff is done, and we are likely going to have a lot of upside. And I think that SUI might be in the top 20 at the end of this bull cycle. And if you go back in history, then we know that the top 20 of 2021 was 12.3 billion in valuation, while the top 20 in 2017 was 900 million, which was one of my favorites during that period, which was called Stratis. So Where can SUI go from here and how much of an upside is actually possible? The entire market has been hammered, including my portfolio. We all know that. Now, SUI has been seeing a lot of downwards momentum as well, but the amount of TVL in the project is still at the all-time high. So what can we expect on the short and long term for SUI? If we look at the short term, then we want to look at the Bitcoin valuation first. We see that we've had a listing in May of 2023. We've had a fall from 5,000 sats all the way back towards 1.1k. I think bear market is one argument, and the second argument is the fact that VCs are technically just daily selling their tokens, which is just normal. From there, we've had a run from 1.1 to 3.8k sats, which is technically a 3.5x against Bitcoin, which is super positive, and that was during the period of the beginning of this year. Against the dollar, in the same period, we did a 10x, and that was not at the start of the bull cycle at all, or in the middle of a bull cycle. So we can expect a lot of things from SUI, and I discuss that next. Now, since then, we had the unlock taking place in May. So people were already selling their positions in assumption or in expectation of the unlock having a negative impact to the price action of SUI, which it did. And we actually made a new all-time low for the chart against Bitcoin, where at this low, we reversed back up and we reversed the trend. And how do we see that? We can see that trend was going down, broke up, took all the liquidity above these highs, so all the stops were taken out, which is usually what we call with taking liquidity, and then it does a retest on the previous support, confirming that it becomes support again, and now we start to attack the high, through which it's very likely that we're going to have a new trend coming up, where we can start expecting new highs, where you use the Fibonacci extension tool, where potential targets are 5.5k sats and 8.4k sats, which is technically a 3 to 6x against Bitcoin from here in the next run. Now, if we go back to where the valuations are coming from, we said during 2021, it was 12 billion for the top 20. During 2017, it was 900 million. And currently, the top 20 is valued at 4.3 billion. I think that SUI is a coin that's going to be at the top 20 at the end of this cycle. And if we calculate the expectations of where the top 20 is going to be at, it's very likely that we're looking at a valuation between 50 to 100 billion as the number 20 valuation is going to be. If that is the case and you use the circulating supply as a reference for the valuation of SUI, then we might be suspecting that we're going to get a 20 to 30x. And it's all depending on how heavy Bitcoin is going to run. Because if you take it the other way around and you say, okay, I expect Bitcoin to go to 300k in this cycle, it's a 5x. And if you assume that SUI at some point is going to do anything between a 3 to 6x against Bitcoin, you automatically are going to have a 15 to 30x as well. So on both ways, it is very likely to expect, and we don't know where the peak is going to be for the market in itself, but it's very likely to expect that SUI is going to be in the top 20 and is going to do anything between 15 to 30x as a potential return. And if we look at the valuations currently with the TVL, it seems like it's a no-brainer to have in your portfolio. Thank you very much for watching. It's the first video that we do in this sort of series talking about altcoins. Let us know what you think about this new form, which altcoins we should be looking at in the comments beneath, and make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, as on Sunday we are releasing a portfolio update. Have a good day. Ciao.